Erev Tov, everybody. Welcome to another edition of our Thursday night Parashat HaShavua class. Tonight, Shiur is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Jack and Biba Ben Kesus in memory of her father, Mr. Amram Ben Aisha Ben Maman, as we commemorate the Shloshim of the Niftar. Tihi Nafsho Torah B'Torah Hayim Bezrat Hashem. The words of Torah that we say tonight should be Le'ilui Nishmato, and we have some very, very deep words tonight, special for you, in continuation somewhat of what we spoke about last week. For those of you that are not listening live or are listening at a later time, feel free to listen to last week's Parashat Toledot, where we spoke about the luz bone, this very, very magical bone. We called it part 1. And it was really a preface to what we're going to speak to tonight. Not directly connected, but definitely would help to get the background information. Nevertheless, if you are still insisting to listen tonight fresh, you are still going to walk out of here with some hidushim and the novelties of what we're going to say tonight. And then maybe afterwards you can go back and listen to what we said last week in Parashat Toledot. Nevertheless, in this week's Parashat Vayetze, this is what we are studying. The Holy Torah teaches us how HaKadosh Baruch Hu imposed upon Yaakov Avinu, Bechir Sheba'avot, the elite of the Avot, the formidable task of establishing the foundation for the holy people of Bnei Israel. This was done in the house of Lavan HaArami. Imagine that you are given this task to father the 12 Shevatim, in a house that is corrupt, a house that is filled with fraud, a house of the biggest Ramai probably in history. And this is where it has to be. Can you imagine how difficult that must have been for Yaakov, and to go there looking for a wife to help build Klal Yisrael in the house of that evil person, concerning who the author of the Haggadah states, Velavan bikesh la'akor et hakol. Lavan intended to uproot everything, and there Yaakov was charged with the task to marry his wives, the future matriarchs, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah. They gave birth for Yaakov to the heads of the 12 tribes, from whom all future generations of Jews would descend. Shifteyah edut leIsrael. Tehilim David HaMelech writes, the tribes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who are testimony for Am Yisrael, all sprout from those years in Lavan's house. Yaakov Avinu's incredible journey begins with the very first pasuk of this week's parasha. Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva, vayelech Harana. Yaakov departed from Beersheva and he headed towards Haran. And Rashi, at the end of last week's parasha, introduces the teaching of our Chachamim in Masechet Megillah that Yaakov sequestered himself in a yeshiva, the yeshiva of Ever Shem Va'ever, for 14 years prior to leaving for Haran. And the Torah proceeds to describe how at the conclusion of those 14 years, HaKadosh Baruch Hu arranged for Yaakov to find himself, to rest in the future place of the Bet HaMikdash, Har Moriah. And it writes in the opening Aliyah, Vayifga b'makom vayalen sham ki ba shemesh. Yaakov Avinu encountered the place and he spent the night there because the sun had set. And there Rashi comments, Sheshak'a lo hama pitom shelo be'onata kedesh yalin sham. The sun set for him suddenly, not at its normal time, so that he would spend the night and sleep there. In a vision that night, he had this divine revelation, this dream that would be the dream of all dreams, that would determine what his path would be for the rest of his life. HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to him in a dream and promised that he would help him and that he would merit establishing a proper household in Israel, a Bayit Ne'eman be'Israel, producing sacred offspring that would lead Klal Yisrael, that would help inherit the promised land. And not only that, he would protect and watch over Yaakov Avinu wherever he went. Vayachalom ve'ineh sulam arza mutzav arza merosho magia shamayma. This ladder that he saw in his dream was set earthward, and its top reached the heavens. Ve'ineh malachei Elohim yordim ve'yordim bo. angels were going up and going down, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu there promised, Ha'aretz asher ata shochev alea lecha et enenu zarecha, the land in which you are resting, that is the land which I will give to your children. Vayazaracha ka'afar ha'aretz, your children will be like the dust of the earth, abundant like the dust of the earth. Uparatzta yama vakenma v'tzafona v'negba, you shall burst forth westward, eastward, northward, and south, and so will your family be blessed, and I will protect you. And in this dream, Yaakov Avinu saw this ladder with angels ascending and descending, depicting the fact that Am Yisrael must first direct their prayers heavenward to Shamayim in order to bring the Shefa, the heavenly bounty, down to earth. And from this vision, Yaakov realized that he had slept in the place of the future Bet HaMikdash, and he was overwhelmed by the feeling, by the sense of awe and fear. Vayikatz Yaakov mishenato, vayomer achen yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh ve'anochi lo yadati. Yaakov wakes up and he can't believe it. Vayira vayomar man nora makom hazeh. How great, how awesome is this place? En ze kim bet Elohim ve'zeh sha'ar hashamayim. This has to be an abode of God, the gate of the heavens. And here Rashi says, ve'zeh sha'ar hashamayim makom tefila la'alot tefilatam hashamayma. This is a place of prayer for their prayers ascend heavenward. And this, of course, became the future site of the Bet HaMikdash, as I mentioned, where thousands upon thousands of tefillot, till today almost, people travel to the Kotel HaMa'arvi to have those tefillot ascend to Shamayim. In this shiur, I would like to touch upon two actions that are performed by Yaakov Avinu immediately when he wakes up from his dream, from this vision which he saw. The pasuk writes right after he wakes up, Vayashkem Yaakov baboker. Yaakov Avinu wakes up, Vayikach et ha'even asher sam merashotav, and he takes the stone that he put underneath his head, Vayasem ota matzeva, and he sets it as a pillar, Vayitzok shemen al rosha, and he poured oil on its top. Vayikra et shem hamakom ahu Bet El, and he called the name of this place Bet El. However, Luz ve'ulam Luz shem ha'ir larishona. However, Luz was the city's original name. So ringing a bell, the name Luz can hint what we're going to be speaking about tonight, as I mentioned. So this is what Yaakov Avinu does when he wakes up from his slumber. So we need to explain two things. Number one, what possessed Yaakov Avinu to make a monument out of stone, or out of the stone that he had rested his head upon? That's number one. And two, what possessed Yaakov Avinu to change the name of the place from Luz to Bet El? What's the reason? Maybe we can interpret these two actions using the following thesis, where Yaakov specifically chose these actions to serve as the cornerstone for the sacred structure of Am Yisrael that he was about to build when he reached the house of Lavan, that he would establish in the city of Haran. So let's begin with the first action that we said, the building of the monument from the stone that was underneath his head. What was with this stone? So prior him going to sleep, the Torah writes, Vayikach et ha'even asher sam merashotam vayasem otam matzeva vayitzok shemen al rosha. Rashi clarifies a contradiction in these pesukim. Before he slept, the Torah writes, Vayikach me'avnei hamakom. He took from the stones of the area. He took plural, many stones. And then in this pasuk that I quoted, Vayikach et ha'even, he took the stone, one stone, the one singular stone that he had placed under his head. So is it many stones or is it just one stone? So Rashi resolves the issue. Very famous Rashi, maybe you remember it from grade school. Vayikach me'avnei hamakom, asa'an kemin marzev saviv lerosho, sheyareh mipenei chayot ra'ot. He formed this gutter pipe around his head with the stones, like a gutter pipe, as a protection from wild animals. Hitchilu merivot zu im zu, and the stones started fighting with each other. Zot omeret alay yaniach tzadik et rosho. One was saying, no, I want the head of the tzaddik to lay on me. The other one was saying the same thing. Miyad asa'an HaKadosh Baruch Hu even ahat. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a miracle and it became one large stone. V'zeu shneimar vayikach et ha'even asher sam rashotav. That's why the pasuk says he took the stone, one stone. Each stone wanted the tzaddik to specifically rest his head upon it, and God transformed it into one stone. This is why the last pasuk says, "Vayikach me'avnei hamakom." Now, we are aware that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a basic principle, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not perform miracles without a purpose. If that's the case, what in fact was the purpose served by this transformation of the many stones into one single stone? So what if these stones were fighting against each other? Very nice. What exactly does this mean? To answer this, we have to look at a midrash that is brought down in Bereshit Rabbah. And the midrash, quoting this pasuk in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, says, Shenem esre avanim natal. Yaakov Avinu took 12 stones. Kach gazar HaKadosh Baruch Hu shehu ma'amid shenem asar shevatim. Because God decreed that Yaakov was going to establish 12 tribes. Amar Yaakov Avinu said, Abraham lo ha'emidan. Abraham did not merit to have and establish 12 tribes. Yitzchak lo ha'emidan. Neither did Yitzchak. Ani, with regards to me, im mitachot hen shneim asar avanim zu lezu. If these 12 stones merge one with another, yodea ani she'ani ma'amid yud bet shevatim. I know that I'll be zocheh to establish the 12 tribes. Once he saw that the stones merged, Yada Yaakov shehu ma'amid yud bet shevatim. That's when he knew that he was going to be the one to successfully establish the 12 tribes. How are we to make sense and comprehend this dispute, this argument that took place among the 12 stones? They represented the neshamot of Klal Yisrael. The neshamot of Klal Yisrael are divided into 12 tribes. Each tribe has its own unique path, its own unique way of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, each stone corresponding to each of the Shevatim specifically wanted the tzaddik, Yaakov, to rest his head upon its own stone. Each one wanted Yaakov Avinu to adopt his methodology as the proper way that Klal Yisrael would serve God. And as he proceeded to release the neshamot of Bnei Israel from concealment in the house of Lavan HaArami, this was the goal. This was the mission of these stones. As Yaakov Avinu was giving birth, I want to be the forefront. Reuven said, no, it's going to be my way. God said it's going to be my way. Naphtali said it's going to be my way. Each one wanted their own way of Judaism to be represented by the Klal. Yaakov understood by Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, that the ultimate goal was for the Shevatim to unite and serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu as one. Torah achat yeh la'ezrach, the pasuk tells us in Sefer Shemot. There shall be one Torah for all the people. So therefore Yaakov Avinu created a sign for himself, and he said, if these stones join together, then I will know that I am destined to successfully establish the 12 Shevatim. Because anyone worthy to be a part of Israel will join together to serve Hashem as one. And that's why the Midrash says, when they indeed joined and merged together, that's when it became clear to him that he was going to be the father of 12 Shevatim. The Zohar writes that the stone that Yaakov Avinu placed underneath his head and subsequently took to make a monument for Hashem represents the Even Shetiyah, the foundation stone described in the Mishnah in Masechet Yoma, which was located beneath the Aron HaKodesh in the Kodesh HaKodashim. The Gemara explains that this Even Shetiyah, Shemimena Hushtat HaOlam, it is called the foundation stone because the entire world was founded from this stone. So what do we see from here? And this was a stone that Yaakov Avinu put underneath his head. We learn from here a huge chidush. The 12 stones that Yaakov Avinu happened to choose were not ordinary stones. In fact, God arranged that he would use 12 specific stones upon which the world was founded. Yaakov then took those stones, placed it underneath his head, and they miraculously transformed into one stone. Ultimately, HaKadosh Baruch Hu placed this special stone under the Aron in the Kodesh HaKodashim. If you take this idea, this detail, and combine it with what we learned in the Mishnah, that the 12 stones represent the 12 tribes, and combine what we learned in the Midrash, and these 12 stones represented the 12 tribes, what a conclusion we arrive at. The Even Shetiyah, this foundation stone, upon which the world was founded, is actually made up of 12 component stones corresponding to the 12 tribes. In fact, this coincides with what we learned in another Gemara concerning the number of pillars that support the world. In Masechet Chagiga, the Gemara writes, V'chachamim omrim, the sages say, Al Yud Bet Amudim Omedet, the world stands on 12, or is being supported by 12 amudim, 12 pillars. Shneimar, like the pasuk says in Vezot HaBeracha, Yatzev Gevulot Amim Lemispar Bnei Yisrael. He set up the boundaries of people according to the number of Bnei Yisrael, which is 12 children of Yisrael. So we've gained now a better understanding of the first action that Yaakov did in preparation for establishing the structure of Am Yisrael. Vayashkem Yaakov baboker, he wakes up in the morning, vayikach et ha'even asher sam merashotav, and he takes this stone that was underneath his head and he makes it into a matzeva, a monument, and they poured oil on it. Yaakov intended to perform this symbolic gesture in anticipation of establishing the foundation of Klal Yisrael, which would be formed from the 12 tribes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in turn, took that stone, the foundation stone, and placed it beneath the Aron in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Then he decides to change the name of the place. Vayikra et shem hamakom hahu Bet El, and he called the name of that place Bet El. Ve'ulam, however, Luz Shem Ha'ir Larishona. The original city name was Luz. We must introduce this idea by bringing Rabbeinu Behaye, who teaches us that this pasuk is actually referring to Yerushalayim, which was formerly known as Luz until Yaakov decided to rename it to Bet El. I want to read you the Rabbeinu Behaye. He says, Hamakom shekar'u Bet El, the name that was called Shekara'o Bet El, the name that he called Bet El, Vehu Yerushalayim. It's Yerushalayim, it's Jerusalem. What was the purpose of the pasuk telling us that it was called Luz originally? What benefit does it do for us? We should be able to say, the pasuk wants to hint to us something. From here the world began. In its development and its conception. It is the beginning of the creation and the renewal. And therefore the Torah tells us that the first name, the original name of this place was Luz, Milashon Luz Hashidra Ba'adam. The same Luz which is at the top of the spinal cord, which we spoke about last week, in the man's spine. Shemimenu atij lehitnaer ulitchadesh lulivare litchiyat hametim. And from that bone, that loose bone, we will be renewed again at the time of techiyat hametim. Ki keshem shepila ka'achidush hazeh haya misham, kach pe'apila techiyat hametim yatchil misham. Unbelievable. So now, just like this place was named Luz, was the source of this wondrous innovation of the world, Yerushalayim being the center of development, the center of conception, where everything came from, so too the loose bone in the human spine is the source for the future miraculous resurrection of the dead, also a renewal, a conception, a development. We spoke last week about this bone. I want to recap a little bit what we spoke about, quoting a midrash. Hadrian would ask Rabbi Yoshua ben Hananiah, and he asked him, from where will HaKadosh Baruch Hu do Techiyat HaMetim in the future? And he said, from the loose shel shidra, the loose bone. He says, how do you know? And Rabbi Yoshua ben Hananiah says, because this loose bone is indestructible. You try squashing it, you try grinding it, you try whatever you do, nothing. Take a hammer, smash it, it's indestructible. Lo chaser klum, no matter what happens, whenever what you do with it. Based on this idea, Rabbeinu Bechaye provides us an amazing insight. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the human body, a bone known as the luz, on our vertebrae, and it remains in existence forever. And it is the starting point from which HaKadosh Baruch Hu will rebuild and resurrect the dead in the future. In a similar fashion, says Rabbeinu Bechaye, HaKadosh Baruch Hu also created the city of Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, which represents the luz of the spatial world. It was the starting point from which God created the spatial world, the world that we know it, and from the rest of the world there expanded and developed. And so too in the future, in Techiyat HaMetim, God will initiate the resurrection, the Techiyah, in Yerushalayim, the luz of the spatial world, and that process will then spread to the rest of the world. But if Yerushalayim was known as luz because it was the spatial starting point of creation, why did Yaakov rename it? It would have made sense just to keep it the name Luz. Why did Yaakov rename the city from Luz to Bet El? And the answer to this question is based on a teaching of the Vilna Gaon on his commentary on the Zohar. There, the subject of the Luz bone in the spine, which never dies and is the source of the resurrection of the dead, is discussed. And as we spoke in length last week, there the Vilna Gaon concludes, V'nikra Betuel al Shem Bet El Shehu Luz. It is called Betuel after Bet El, which is Luz. Last week we went in length, and again for those just joining us, I really suggest you listen to what we spoke about last week. We spoke about how the name, the Luz bone, is called Betuel Arami, because how it frauded the Nachash. It's a tremendous shiur. Listen, I encourage everyone to listen to it. Because it's called Betuel, Yaakov Avinu changed Luz to Bet El. Luz bone located in the spine is called Betuel. The letters of the name Betuel can be broken out to spell Bito El, the daughter of God. And in this manner, the Vilna Gaon explains the connection between the Luz bone, which is called Betuel, and Bito Shel El, the daughter of El in Yerushalayim, which is called Bet El. The Luz and Yerushalayim are inherently connected. The Luz is Betuel, and Yerushalayim is Bet El. Just as the Luz bone is the source of life for the body, so too Yerushalayim is the source of life for the universe. Vayikra et shema makom ha'u Bet El, and he called the name of the place Bet El. And then the pasuk says ve'ulam Luz shema'il harishona. However, Luz was the city's original name due to the fact that it represented the Luz of the spatial world. Now, since the Luz bone is referred to as Betuel, Bito Shel El, Yerushalayim is the Luz of the spatial world, is referred to as Bet El. Unbelievable connection. You can even say something else, a beautiful allusion. What's the word ve'ulam? However, we never see that word, ve'ulam. Ve'ulam The word ulam, which means but, it was called luz originally. The word ulam has this, the acronym of the word ulam is Vene'eman ata lehachayot metim, which we say in our Amidah. And you are trustworthy to resurrect the dead. So we see clearly an allusion in the pasuk to the fact that God will initiate the resurrection, the Techiyat HaMetim in the future from Bet El, from Luz, the Luz of the spatial world, which is Yerushalayim. This teaches us the amazing connection between the two actions that Yaakov performed the morning he woke up from that dream. He built a monument from the stone that was underneath his head, and he called the name of the place Bet El. The common denominator between the two actions is that they both relate to the foundation and cornerstone of the nation of Am Yisrael, for whom the world was created. Number one, the stone that was placed underneath his head and then consecrated as a monument, which represents the Even HaShetiyah, the foundation stone upon which the world is created. And number two, while Yerushalayim, which is named Betel, also represents the luz of all creation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will initiate the Techiyat HaMetim from Yerushalayim, just as he will initiate the resurrection of the dead from the luz bone. We can stop here, but we might as well just continue a little bit more. What was Yaakov's prayer once he woke up? He was so in shock. He made this unbelievable tefillah to God. Yaakov Avinu said, Vaidar Yaakov neder lemor. Yaakov promised, he made a vow. Im yeh Elohim imadi, if God will be with me. Ushmarani baderech hazeh, and watches over me on this road. Asher anochi olech, that I'm traveling. Venatani lechem leechol ubeged lilbos, and he gives me bread to eat, clothing to wear. V'shavti b'shalom bet avi, and allows me to return in peace to my father's house. Ve'ayashem li lelokim, and God will be, and he will be a God to me. Ve'aven azot asher samti matzeva yeh bet Elohim, this stone that I place over here will be a bet Elohim, a house of God. Ve'kol asher titen li, and everything he gives me, aser aserenu lach, I will tithe. I will set aside ma'aser. Why did Yaakov promise to tithe, to set aside 10% from everything that Hashem would give him precisely at that moment? What changed at that moment? He didn't want to give 10% before that dream. He knew who God was. Why specifically now, after this revelation, does Yaakov Avinu want to give this 10%? In the Sefer Ma'or V'Shemesh, addresses this question. And he quotes a Gemara in Masechet Ta'anit that says, Yaakov Avinu lo met. Yaakov Avinu never died. What does that mean, Yaakov Avinu never died? He was here, I can call him up right now? No, we know he's in Me'arat HaMachpelah, he's there. So what does it mean Yaakov Avinu never died? And he explains that Yaakov Avinu successfully sanctified and purified his physical body to the level of the luz bone, which does not depend on any material benefit from this world. Again, listen to the shiur last week and you'll see more about what we spoke about that. He achieved this to such a degree that his entire body became like the luz bone, which remains in existence, intact, and never dies. And that's what it means, Yaakov Avinu lo met. Yaakov Avinu never died. And when the pasuk says later on in Sefer Bereshit, Vayavo Yaakov Luza, Asher be'eretz Canaan, and Yaakov came to Luz, the city of Luz, which is in the land of Canaan. And what does that mean? He elevated his entire body to the level of Luz. In fact, when Yaakov Avinu, at the end of Sefer Bereshit, when he meets with Yosef once again, Vayomer Yaakov el Yosef, Yaakov tells Yosef, El Shaddai nira elai beluz be'eretz Canaan vayvarech oti, that God appeared to me in Luz, in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me. Yaakov Avinu blessed his son Yosef that his entire body should achieve the status of the Luz bone. Based on what we learn, the pasuk informs us that Yaakov Avinu sanctified himself to that level in the land of Canaan, which is Yerushalayim, when he was in the king's palace, the Luz of the universe, when he was there on Har HaMoriah, when he woke up from that dream. In Parashat Bereshit, when the Torah describes God's creation of man, the Torah writes, Vayetze Hashem Elokim et ha'adam afar min ha'adama, and Hashem formed the man of soil from the earth, Vayipach be'apav nishmat hayim, and he blew into his nostrils the soul of life, Vayhi ha'adam le'nefesh chaya, and man became a living soul. Rashi notes that the word Vayetze in that pasuk is spelled with two yuds. It should be spelled Vav Yud Tzadi Reish. Instead, it's spelled Vav Yud Yud Tzadi Reish. Two yuds. And he says that the two yuds represent the two periods of formation. One for this world and one for Techiyat HaMetim. And maybe we can say that this refers to the two types of formation regarding man's physical form. Number one, you have a Yetzirah La'olam Hazeh, which is the formation of his body in this world in such a manner that the body dies and disintegrates. And second, you can argue and say V'yetzirah Le'Techiyat HaMetim. There's a formation of the loose bone in the spine that does not die but persists. It's intact and serves as the foundation in the future where the entire body will rejuvenate and ultimately be resurrected. With this, on this train of thought, we can suggest the following, that this is what prompted Yaakov Avinu to name the place originally known as Luz to Bet El. Because upon realizing that the stone that he placed underneath his head was none other than the Even HaShetiyah, the stone which the world was founded on, that was eventually put beneath the Aron HaKodesh, and that was in Yerushalayim, which in fact Yerushalayim represented the luz of the entire universe. It was the foundation of the spatial world. That's why he prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he should merit, that his body should reach such a degree that it no longer benefit from anything physical in this world. He wished to elevate his entire physical, material being to the status of the luz bone, which endures forever. And that's why he renamed the place known as Luz Bet El, alluding to the luz bone known as Betuel, Bito Shel El, the daughter of God. This maybe can allow us to understand just a tidbit of what Yaakov Avinu meant in his tefillah. Im yeh Elohim imadi, ushmarani baderech hazeh asher anochi olech. I pray, if God will be for me, and He's going to follow me and protect me on this road, I pray that I do not follow the path of Lavan Arami, chasing all the fancies of the world and all the pleasures of the world. V'natan li lechem le'echol u'beged lilbosh. And if God provides me with bread and clothing to wear, just provide me with enough food and clothing to satisfy my basic needs, but not enough to provide me any greater degree of pleasure and benefit. V'shavti b'shalom el bet avi, so that I may return to my heavenly Father. El bet avi is referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the house in peace. After 120, Yaakov lived 147, that I return to the Bet Hashem with my body intact. Ve'aya Hashem li lelokim. Therefore, may I merit to devote all matters of this world solely to Hashem. Ve'aya Hashem li lelokim. It will be only holiness, only spirituality. Ve'aven azot asher samti matzeva yeh bet elokim. And the stone, this stone comprised of 12 component stones, corresponding to the 12 tribes of Israel, shall endure forever, like the Even HaShetiyah, the foundation stone upon which the world was founded. And then he said, V'kol asher titenni aser aserenu lach. And everything you give me, I will tithe. Yaakov Avinu alludes to an incredible idea. The phrase aser aserenu, which literally means I will tithe, is composed of two words derived from the word eser, meaning 10. Aser, aserenu. Two words of eser, two words of 10. The letter yud has a numerical value of 10. And therefore, the phrase aser aserenu can be seen as an allusion to the two yuds found in the word Vayetze, and God formed, representing the formation of the earthly body and the formation of the loose bone that remains intact, where Am Yisrael will be recreated in the time of Techiyat HaMetim. The former formation derives benefit from this world. This is our bodies now, and ultimately disintegrates. But it's the latter formation, the second Yud, avoids any benefit in this world. It only eats from the food of Motzei Shabbat, like we spoke about last time. That bone exists for all eternity. And that's why Yaakov Avinu says, V'kol asher titenli, whatever worldly matters you provide me with, aser aserenu lach, I should merit sanctifying both bodily formations solely to Hashem. Even the physical, material body should be transformed and elevated to the status of the eternal loose bone. Wishing everybody a wonderful night. Shabbat Shalom.